Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to the County Employee Retirement System Board of Trustees regular meeting for June 9th, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Eric, if you'd mind, read the opening statement for us, please.
This is a regular meeting of the County Employees Retirement System Board of Trustees. This meeting is being broadcast via video teleconference pursuant to KRS 61826 and may be viewed by the public at the Kentucky Public Pensions Authority offices located at 1260 Louisville Road in Frankfort, Kentucky. It is also being broadcast to the public live via Facebook. If you are speaking and are not appearing by video, please identify yourself before talking. If the video or audio broadcast is interrupted, we will attempt to reestablish a connection. Connection cannot be reestablished within 30 minutes. The meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled to a later date.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Sherry, if you don't mind, take the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cheatham.
Here.
Dr. Carver.
Here.
Mr. Foster.
Here.
Mr. Fulkerson.
Here.
Dr. Hackbart.
Here.
Dr. Milkman. Mr. O'Meara.
Here.
Mr. McGraw.
Here.
And Mr. Webb.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Being a quorum present, we'll go ahead and proceed. We've got several minutes to approve. I generally like to do them individually. So in your package, you had minutes for the March 26th meeting. Are there any changes, additions, or deletions that need to be made? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept as presented.
So move.
Got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Minutes of March 26th are passed as presented. You also had in your packet minutes for the April 16th meeting. Are there any changes, additions, deletions that need to be made? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept as presented.
So move.
Got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second the motion.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Minutes of April 16th pass as presented. And then we have minutes for meeting of April the 30th. Are there any changes or deletions or changes that need to be made here? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Then finally, we have a set of minutes for the May 13th special call meeting. Are there any changes, additions, or deletions that need to be made here? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept.
So move.
Got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, nay? Ayes have it. I learned several years ago when we tried to pass several at one time that I had council members that liked to edit grammatically, and it got to be a hairy thing. So anyway, with that, I'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, Sherry, Chairman's Corner. Don't have anything really to report other than items that you've seen in your packet, but do want to remind everybody that we have set the date of October the 22nd and the 23rd for the board retreat and training. This will be the first time that I'm aware of anyway that we have done this since separation for sure. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it'll be a good opportunity for everybody to get their feet on the ground and get a refresher for some of those that have been here for a while. I would encourage you to reach out to Ed and give him any suggestions on agenda items that you'd like to see for that 2-day training. I know Ryan and his staff have worked hard on putting a lot of good material together, but I want to make sure we also address any areas that any of you all feel uncomfortable with without some additional training as well. I think Ed referenced the legislative agenda. Ed and I are beginning the process to meet with our employer partners, KCO, KLC, Kentucky School Board Association, see not only what they've got on their mind, but what we've got on ours as well. And I think we're going to probably have first one of those meetings here in the middle of June. So I look forward to putting those items together and bringing them back to the board and giving you all an opportunity to fine tune and give us your thoughts there as well. There are a couple of items that I would make sure that you all draw your attention to. Again, these items were addressed in Ed's report. There was a referral from the state auditor's office with regard to a county audit for Barron County. I'm not going to get into any issues with Barron County, but I think it probably points out a larger issue or concern that we probably ought to take a look at and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're not or that we are doing a good job of auditing and making sure that payments are being made and remitted to the system the way they ought to. We're certainly going to be on the hook for the benefits. We need to make sure that we're bringing in the correct amount of money in the meantime. The other thing that was in Ed's report, and I think both Dr. Hackford and Bill may touch on this in some of their reporting, is with regard to legacy public equity positions. Some of these have been out there since the early 2000s that I think we need to kind of focus on and figure out how to get cleaned up and stop any bleeding for fees that, for basically static investments that we may have out there. So there's a lot that we're looking at. Just want to make sure that you all are aware of them. If you have any questions on any of those, I know Dr. Hackbert and Bill and myself and Ed will be happy to give you more detail as we get into those. So with that, I will move on to the actuarial committee report. Mike, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Yes, sir. We need to consider approving and adopting actuarial economic assumptions going forward. And I believe Danny or Janie or both will go with that with us and make a recommendation, and we will consider where to go from there.
Thank you, Mike. It's Danny White and GRS, Janie from GRS, and the high-level summary is we're recommending the continued use of the assumptions in last year's VAL for use in the June 30, 2025 valuation. So in other words, no changes to economic assumptions or demographic assumptions for that matter either. With that, we'll open up to any questions or discussion.
Danny, I think I ask this question quite often when we get in this. Just, I certainly understand and don't have any issues with the inflation number, the investment growth going forward. I think it's probably something we're going to have to start looking at based on Wilshire's updated forecast and that sort of thing as we kind of see how. Do you mind to touch on the payroll growth number, considering what we've seen the last few years and what your all's thoughts are on that, so that particularly those that don't serve on that actuarial committee have an opportunity to understand what we're looking at and seeing? Absolutely.
The payroll growth assumption doesn't impact the liabilities themselves. So whether you have a 2% or 0%, your liability number is the same, your funded ratio, the dollar amount of your unfunded liability is the same. What that assumption's used for is you're collecting contributions on payroll, and so we're making an assumption about how that payroll or I'll back that up, and I'm going to say it quite really different. Um, it's an assumption used in terms of financing of the unfunded liability. And so instead of you think of a mortgage, you got level dollar, 0% payroll. You know, you pay the same mortgage payment every month till your mortgage pays off. That's relative to having a 0% payroll growth assumption. Having a payroll growth assumption of 2% would be akin to going to your banker and saying, "Hey, I want my figure up a payment schedule or coupon book, payment book, so that my payments increase by 2% every year, and then I still get paid off over the same amount of time." So essentially, what's that doing is you're asking the banker to pay less upfront and more down the road. The idea being that perhaps your payments as a percentage of your income will coincide with each other. The risk to that, in terms of public financing, to have a payroll growth or a high payroll growth assumption, which actually CRS used to have prior to 2017, is what we refer to as actuarial backloading. So when you have a large unfunded liability and you have a long funding period or amortization period, you're not actually even paying down interest on your unfunded liability, let alone principal. And so that's referred to as actuarial backloading. You're backloading the payments, and that's the part that we try to be cautious about, try to minimize the effect of this backloading the payments. And so that's why the recent years actual payroll growth has been higher. But what that'll translate to down the road is if it is higher than assumed, then your contribution rate as a percentage of pay will still go down. So rather than having it go down by an assumption, I'd rather see with a backloading risk to actually see how that experience emerges out. I think it's just a stronger financial position. But with that, I open up to any questions. Also, Janie's on there. If Janie's got any other comments I may have overlooked, please speak up.
Anybody have questions? I just, the relationship to our payroll growth assumption, of course, is made up of two different numbers. One, just head count, and then secondly, of course, is payroll. And how that impacts the contribution rates and the assumptions going forward, I think people need a good understanding of. So that's something, Ed, that I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of a discussion about when we get into our training in October. Is just how each of these three assumptions impact one way or the other what goes on with contribution rates.
Okay. We'll be happy to put some information together.
Okay. All right. Nobody has any other questions. Mike, I think.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I have you have a memorandum in your material, and I would like to make a motion based on the contents of that memo that we ratify the recommendation of the Actuarial Committee based on the reasons set out in the memorandum submitted.
Okay. Have a motion. Do I have a second to accept the recommendation from the Actuarial Committee?
Second.
A second by JT. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the recommendation of maintaining the current assumptions, economic assumptions, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, thank you. Mike, you got other items?
I believe that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, who was that?
Ed,
Yeah, Ed.
I believe that's Ed from the actuarial committee.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll move on to the investment committee. Dr. Hackbert, I know you're there somewhere.
Thank you, Lyle. The CRS Investment Committee met on May 28th. It was chaired by Lyle Cheatham in my absence. Thank you, Lyle, for taking on that responsibility when I was away from Lexington. There was no action taken by the investment committee requiring ratification by the full CERS board. In terms of the other information and just items on the agenda, Wilshire provided an overall economic and market overview, and the investment staff provided an update on the pension fund performance. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn the program over to Steve and to Wilshire to follow up on their reports, respectively, on the economic and financial outlook and the investment performance of our funds. So it's over to you, Steve or Wilshire.
Thank you, Dr. Hackbart. I did want to provide a brief highlight of the portfolios and the performance for the quarter, which were covered in the investment committee meeting. Also provide an update on activity since the end of the quarter. One page forward, please, Sherry. All right, 2 pages, 34. There we go. Thank you. Consistent with the overall market backdrop, the portfolios produced modest positive performance during the quarter as risk markets sold off in March, giving up most of the gains they achieved at the beginning of the quarter, kind of as that post-election optimism gave way to concerns that policy uncertainty would tip the economy into a recession, which saw the S&P hitting a new record high in mid-February, only to tumble into correction territory in just 3 weeks. The CRS pension composite produced a return of plus 44 basis points for the quarter, and the CRS insurance composite produced a return of plus 33 basis points versus the benchmark return of positive 37 basis points. Individual portfolio performance ranged from up 32 basis points to up 45 basis points for the quarter. The core fixed income, real return, and specialty credit portfolios all produced strong absolute performance during the quarter, which was offset by negative performance in public equities, which is the largest allocation across all of the portfolios. The real return and specialty credit portfolios were really the standout relative performers, outperforming their benchmarks by 99 and 128 basis points respectively. Fiscal year to date, as of the end of the quarter, the CRS pension composite has produced a return of 5.0%, underperforming the blended benchmark by 22 basis points, while the CRS insurance composite produced a return of 4.71% versus the blended benchmark return of 5.22%. Page 36, please, Sherry. At the investment committee meeting, we did provide an update on the internally managed portfolio performance. All of the internally managed portfolios, these are reported at the trust level. Not all portfolios are invested in all of these internally managed portfolios. As a reminder, the majority of these assets are passively managed and intended to replicate the return and risk of public indices, providing inexpensive beta exposure to the more efficient markets while providing staff flexibility and rebalancing the overall portfolio assets and risk allocations. Additionally, staff manages a number of proxy portfolios to gain exposure to assets with similar risk, return, and economic characteristics that serve as transitional positions for less liquid asset classes as capital that is committed is called by managers and staff sources new investment opportunities. Page 38, please, Sherry. Just an update on our allocations. As of the end of the quarter, all asset classes for every portfolio were within the IPS specified range, and the majority of the positioning is within 1% of the respective target allocation. So a lot of work in moving the portfolios towards those targets over the last several quarters. During the quarter, we did reduce the overall overweight to global public equities as we rebalanced U.S. and non-U.S. exposures. As you can see, we remain modestly overweight public equities as the offset to the underweight in the other component of that growth allocation, which is private equity. We've remained neutral duration in the core fixed income portfolio as yields have remained volatile with a 10-year trading range very wide at 80 basis points year to date. The real return allocations continue to move closer towards their targets as managers have called capital, including the farmland mandate, fully funding, and over half of the railcar leasing allocation called last quarter. The remainder of CRS's original 2023 commitment to the inland marine manager, plus the incremental additional allocation made recently, are scheduled to be deployed by the end of this quarter. So hopefully in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks. Page 55, please, Sherry. A look at attribution in a little more detail than I initially discussed. So across the portfolios, the largest contributor to our outperformance during the quarter was that strong relative performance in the specialty credit portfolio as managers produced positive excess performance across mandates. The real return, public equity, and real estate portfolios all outperformed their benchmarks during the quarter. The real return portfolio posted a return of 2.85% for the quarter, outperforming the benchmark's return of 1.86%. The portfolio's largest allocation is that the MLP investment, which gained 6.8% during the quarter and has returned over 26% annualized over the last 3 years. As I mentioned, the portfolio's farmland mandate was funded in the fourth quarter of 2024 and returned 3.1% during that quarter. And the portfolio's inland marine manager returned 1.4% for the fourth quarter of 2024 and 8.2% for the full year. Across portfolios, the largest driver of underperformance was the private equity portfolio's underperformance relative to its public equity benchmark, something we've talked about multiple times in the past. And the overweight to public equity was also a modest detractor from overall performance during the quarter. Specifically for the private equity benchmark, as we've talked about, we're working with Wilshire. Wilshire recently provided some feedback that staff had requested regarding presentation comparison options, peer universe. So we hope to bring a recommendation for a change either with regard to the specific benchmark or a recommendation to use multiple benchmarks with some additional reporting. We hope to bring that before the investment committee, hopefully at the next investment committee meeting. Page 63, please, Sherry. From a peer universe perspective, all of the portfolios have performed well, producing top decile or near top quartile performance over the reported 1, 3, and 5-year periods. Over that same period, the portfolios have all produced top decile or just outside of top decile Sharpe ratios, which is that risk-adjusted performance, demonstrating the efficiency of their construction and management. Page 82, please, Sherry. An update on the investment budget was also provided at the investment committee meeting as well as the finance committee meeting. So I won't go over this in too much detail, but I would note that through the first 9 months of fiscal 2025, realized expenses were in line with the budget, with a total of $8.9 million or 71% of the budget spent year to date. As we've noted, that while there's significant variance at the individual line item in those legal and accounting services based on specific litigation activity, the overall legal expenses incurred are in line with the total budgeted. So kudos to Michael and team for accurate forecasting and budgeting. And while we expect litigation activity and related expenses to remain elevated, given the resolution in certain matters, we will be proposing a reduction of $1.2 million in overall legal expenses for fiscal 2026. Since the end of the quarter, volatility has picked up with sentiment-driven sell-offs and rallies based on headlines and evolving narratives. The S&P 500, based on this morning, is currently up over 20% since its low on April 8th. One of the biggest rallies ever for the index, but is still lower than it was 6 months ago and from the close on the day after the election. After an initial read of minus 20 basis points for the first quarter, the latest Atlanta Fed GDP Now model estimate for real GDP growth in the second quarter is 3.8%. That came out this morning. April performance was recently finalized and circulated, with the portfolios producing returns ranging from up 67 to 76 basis points for the month versus the benchmark return of 77 basis points. So monthly performance was just in line with the benchmark. May performance is still preliminary, but the portfolios performed well during the month and are indicated up 2.5 to 3%. For May, volatility remained elevated, especially as trade policy the roller coaster continued. As we all know, Moody's downgraded U.S. debt, the last major rating agency to do so. and the House advanced a reconciliation bill that would further increase the federal deficit. So lots of headlines, lots of volatility. Risk assets in that environment were able to roar back for the month, with U.S. public equities up 6.4%. Growth stocks outperformed value, and large cap outperformed small cap. So that was really a rotation from what we had seen earlier in the year. Non-U.S. equities performed almost as well, up just under 6% for the month, with developed markets outperforming emerging markets. For May, real assets were broadly up, with listed real estate up 1.4% and oil up 4.4%. High yield bonds were up almost 1.7% as credit spreads tightened 70 basis points in high yield, and levered loans were up for the month 1.55%. During May, core fixed income was the laggard, losing 72 basis points as rates rose, with the 10-year up 24 basis points for the month. The other thing I wanted to highlight that was talked about in the investment committee meeting is, I think Michael's going to cover from a legal perspective, but from the investment perspective, the GP for Bay Hills has been officially removed, and Murray Analytics has been appointed as the liquidating person for the funds under Section 7 of the CRS procurement policy. We've been working hard with Marty and her team to ensure we have everything in place for a smooth transition and ongoing management and operation of the funds. Following the reconciliation process, approximately $17 million that had been sitting in uninvested cash was transferred to the portfolios. That was just done recently. Longer term, we're evaluating whether the investments in the funds can be transferred in kind directly to the portfolios to be managed in-house by KPPA staff, which would further reduce the overall fees for the investments. That's a pretty brief summary of the investment committee meeting. There was a lot of good discussion, but happy to take any questions.
Questions for Steve? Okay. Steve, it seemed like there was a couple of things I'd asked during the investment committee meeting, but one of them, and you or folks from Wilshire are welcome to chime in. Just wondering what your all's thoughts are going forward, particularly with regard to U.S. versus global equities, and whether we're shifting to any extent between those two at this point, or not.
I think the day of most recent history, and I'll let Wilshire weigh in as well, of, we talked about U.S. exceptionalism, and I think certainly the tariff policy has unwound some of that, or at least caused people to rethink positioning U.S. versus non-U.S. We've seen outperformance in non-U.S. public equities, certainly since the beginning of the year. U.S. equities have rallied back. They've had a strong May, as we mentioned, and outperformed non-U.S. equity markets. I think going forward, our positioning, we have unwound some of the overweight that we had in the portfolio, so we're more of a neutral positioning overall. I think the uncertainty as far as fiscal policy globally, as well as what the resolution will be on the tariff front, is going to drive a lot of the relative valuations. Wilshire, you're happy to weigh in.
Yeah,
Sure, Steve.
I think that was sorry. I think that was a great overview. We did not include it in the board materials, but in our IC materials, we did provide March forward-looking assumptions, and we've talked about this for quite some time now, that U.S. equity market valuations are very rich, and on a forward-looking basis, as of March, we were expecting 4.6% for U.S. stocks. If we were to look globally ex-U.S., we have a slightly higher return assumption there, just under 6% at 5.95. Now, that being said, if we look at where the market weights are, U.S. versus non-U.S., we're still in that 60+% of the market being made up of the U.S. markets. So when Steve says they're coming back to neutral, I assume I think what he's talking about is neutral to the market there. That does not mean that if there is a view at the staff or investment committee level, if we wanted to look at slightly overweighting global ex-US, that's something we could certainly consider. But even in Wilshire's investment strategy committee, we are not making those calls internally right now. There is some arguments that could be made that given some of the U.S. Policies going forward, that might provide more opportunity to the non-U.S. markets, but we're not making tactical decisions right now based on that because I think there is a lot of uncertainty in the market. So our position and what we've been talking to clients about currently is maintaining the rebalancing policies, maintaining diversification, because in the time of uncertainty, we don't want to be making those calls right now.
Chris, you want to, not just in terms of return, what are your all thoughts are in terms of risk comparison between the two?
Yeah, good question. So if we were to look at risk numbers, we do have a slightly higher risk number on the global ex-US numbers. We're looking at 17% for US, 19, just over 19% for the global ex-US. That would all be baked into any asset allocation work that we've done, whether it was being done now or when we did it last year for you. That's all baked into the mean variance optimization. So from a risk perspective, the biggest risks that we can see are the geopolitical risks. If you look at where the U.S. stands right now from a policy perspective, that is probably the biggest risk going forward. And we don't know what those policies ultimately are going to land on. We have better insight, I think, today than what we did 3 months ago, but I still think there are some uncertainties there.
Yeah, I think compositionally for the non-U.S., you also remember you have developed and emerging in that. So you're naturally going to tend to have a higher risk component to broad non-U.S. markets.
To what extent are you all factoring in currency fluctuation into that risk profile?
So currency we look at as a separate piece, and we've never been a proponent of taking big currency bets. Whether you want to hedge or unhedge in the long term, we feel that trade is going to come out in the wash. Very much like interest rates, that's not something that too many investment managers are going to make calls on. Currency is another one that I think it's very hard to get right, both incoming and outgoing on that trade. So, there definitely could be pressures on the US dollar going forward, but we feel that that's where your real return or your real assets are going to be the offset to that. So that's something that, as Steve mentioned, he's working very diligently right now, trying to get the real return allocation at target levels, and we will continue to work with staff to do that.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for either Steve or Chris, David?
Well, I wanted to echo the comment from the committee meeting on congratulations on the Bay Hill unwind. That's been a long and arduous effort by a lot of people, and just want to say thank you that we got to where we are today.
Well, kudos go to a lot of people. That was a lot of work, as you mentioned, for a lot of individuals. So, I think the systems are in a much better place.
Without a doubt. Okay. I don't think there was anything that we needed to ratify coming out of the investment committee. Dr. Hackford, or anything else that you need to bring up?
I think that's it, Chairman.
All right. Thank you, sir. We'll move from there to the Personnel Committee. JT?
We did have some things that need to be ratified by the whole board. You see them there on the screen or in your packet.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd like to, we recommended that this be approved. And so now we'd like to have a vote by the board.
Okay. The two items being the CEO, the CRSCO contract for another 2-year term with Ed Owens, The only change that I remember that we settled on, JT, was just the increase in salary, correct?
That's correct. You're correct.
Okay. All other items stay in place for those.
And the other one is just the dates.
Yes, that's right. I just want to, because I know we've got some new members that may not be aware of it. One of the things that when Ed came aboard, when we implemented separation back in 2021, part of Ed's package was that he did not choose to participate in what would have been the KRS system, since he would have been technically a state employee, which saved us a considerable amount of money in contribution. In turn, what it has turned out to is that we contribute into Kentucky Deferred Comp on behalf of Ed, which I'm not sure if somebody on here can give us a dollar figure, but it seems to me like I remember writing down at the time anyway, it saved us about $50,000 a year in contribution level. So
it's quite a big difference.
Go ahead, JT. I'm sorry.
Quite a big difference. You're correct.
Yeah. So with that, I'd just simply say that I think Ed's worth every dollar that we've paid him. He's done a tremendous job, particularly the last couple of years with regard to helping coordinate and spearhead and drag us along sometimes with regard to some of these legal issues, not to mention legislative issues. I can't begin to tell you the response that I get out of the legislators that I talk to that appreciate Ed's communication with them, which I think has gone a long way to helping us maintain a good relationship going forward with both the House and the Senate. So I would gladly make the motion to accept the contract as presented by the Personnel Committee.
I'll second.
Okay, got a first and a second. Are there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes have it. Contract is confirmed for another 2-year pitch, Mr. Owens. We appreciate your work and look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you.
That concludes all of our stuff.
Well, I think we've got the general counsel, JT.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were voting on them together.
Like I said, I'm one of those that like to separate things out.
Yeah, okay. No, I think that's a good plan, too.
I don't think there are any changes in that, is it?
No, just the dates. Just the dates of the contract.
Okay. I don't think there's any doubt, the help that Eric and his team have provided us, particularly over the last year. But, if anybody's got questions with regard to the contract, it doesn't show on the page in front of you, but I think it was included as far as the copy of the contract, as far as what the rate is. I appreciate you keeping those costs down, Eric.
That's right.
Anybody like to make a motion to approve the new contract with?
So moved.
There we go. JT, thank you, sir. We got a first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Bill. Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Contract with Johnson, Bronco, and Brennan is approved going forward. Thank you, Eric. We look forward to your continued guidance. With that, I think that take care of you, JT?
That does. Thank you very much for your help.
All right. Good deal. So with that, we'll move on to the Finance Committee. I think we've got several items there to cover. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The CERS Finance Committee had a regular meeting on May 19th, 2025, and bring forward a couple of things for the board's approval. I'd like to do it a little out of order from the agenda and talk about hazardous duty request. We considered a total of 15 requests for hazardous duty designation for positions in member organizations. The data to support that was in our packet and in today's packet as well. And so the committee unanimously approved each request and bring forward for full approval by the board. And Dwan Surratt is probably here to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Juan, are you out
Yes,
there?
I am. I am here.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add.
All right. I think it was pretty straightforward. Do I have a motion to accept the recommendations for hazardous duty?
Make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Got a first to have a second.
Second.
By anyone. Second by JT. All right, Bill, any questions or discussion? Anything anybody wants to add? If not, all in favor of adding the hazardous duty position classifications for the 15 referenced in the packet signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Those hazardous duty positions are approved going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, I'd like to turn the information over to Mr. Lamb. He has the new hybrid percentage and CERS allocation to present, as well as some data on the budget and the quarterly financials. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Romero. That first memo there is a request of the Finance Committee approve this individual allocation to the two CERS plans of the hybrid percentage. So the hybrid percentage for fiscal year 26 starts on July 1. It was approved during the April 23rd board meeting. The CERS portion of the fiscal year 26 hybrid percentage is 64.35%. And then based on head count, as it was done in the past, the numbers as of 6/30/2024 for the CERS non-hazardous plan and the CERS hazardous plan are presented in the memo, and what percentage that is, and then how that 64.35% is to be allocated. Excuse me. And this is for admin expenses that aren't specifically charged to either system, and this is how it's allocated based on that percentage for fiscal year 26. And so if I would be happy if the board would follow up on the Finance Committee's recommendation and approve this going forward.
On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by JT. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
The next item that I'd like to talk about, if I may, is just the draft budget that's presented there. There's been some changes to some of those numbers as I've been working through some of the items with our personnel group, our HR group, and the other executives that work with me. But what's significantly changed within that fiscal year 2026 draft admin budget is that unallocated reserve has gone down to it's less than $100,000. I will explain a little bit more of that in the KPPA meeting when I present the admin budget to the KPPA at the end of this month for formal approval. But there's been some significant increases to various positions at KPPA based on the personnel cabinet's review. And so we've had to increase some of the salaries and then the related costs of those positions in the personnel line item. And so from what's presented in front of you, basically there's another 300 or so thousand in the personnel budget. And the rest of that has also been allocated to other areas. based on maybe the Louisville office coming on, et cetera. So that reserve is now less than $100,000 as my budget stands at draft today. So that was informational only.
Okay.
And then, I present those financial statements in the finance committee. I won't go through the reading of those again. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to field anything on there. Mr. Cheatham, I still owe you a more detailed explanation of why our contributions for the CERS plan are a little higher, whether it's based on the salaries and or the headcount. When I was trying to calculate that math last week, I couldn't get the math to math out. So I need to revisit exactly what's driving that at an individual level. And give you that breakdown, but that's something that's still on my to-do list to elaborate more on the contributions reports, which are a few pages down.
Okay.
And then the admin budget year to date is presented. I think it starts on 125, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And so those are the notes that I went over in the finance committee meeting. They're there for your reading. This was as of 9 months at March 31. I have looked at the admin budget through May as of last week, and I anticipate us staying within budget for all of the major categories. The one large item that caught me off guard within the personnel cabinet was I inadvertently under budgeted for the employer health insurance rates. And when I went through some calculations of that, it just looked like it was a miscalculation. So we're going to be probably over budget in that individual line item by about $200 and some $1,000. But overall, within the personnel line item, we still have plenty of capacity as we approach the 6/30 year end.
Okay.
If there any questions for Mr. Lamb? Well, that concludes our report.
Okay. Steve, Tommy, if you all review any of that material that you've got questions on, I encourage you to reach out to Bill or Michael Lamb, either one, and they'll be more than happy to walk you through what you're seeing. It takes, everybody's accounting systems look a little bit different, even though they may follow a standard pattern, they can still look a little bit different. So I tend to ask questions a lot of times about what makes up this particular category. Feel free to do the same thing. Okay. Bill, anything else from the Finance Committee, sir?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll move on to the Joint Retiree Health Plan Committee, I believe. Dr. Carver.
Yeah, so the CERS and KRS Retiree Plan Committee met on May 14th. We have nothing to ratify or to vote on. There is some information that was included, just some of the highlights. All of the claims for medical and pharmacy costs increase, so that's just something to be aware of. And also, the Kentucky Group Employee Health Insurance Board needs a member. It has to be a retiree. It can be from KRS or CERS. None of the board members at the time of the meeting was in a position to actually volunteer to be on the committee. So we're bringing this to the full CERS and KRS boards to see if there is an interest. One of the things to highlight, and I think was the biggest issue with no one wanting to commit at the time, was that you have to go to Frankfurt once a month. It's an in-person meeting. So if anyone's interested, they can let us know, and we'll be sure to vote on that and bring it to the full KRS and CRS committee.
Okay. Ed, if you don't mind, why don't you have some individual conversations with those that qualify on our board and see who may or may not be interested, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely, sir.
Very, very important board. I wish I had spent more time over the last few years delving into the health side of it, and I haven't. But I'm not so sure that, particularly from the classified workers through the school systems, that's not the most important thing for them is what's going on with our health insurance. So it's a very important item.
Can I make a statement, Mr. Cheatham?
Absolutely.
It's Connie Pettyjohn. I just want to make sure everybody's aware that I'm absolutely the proxy to whoever wants to go. I will be there at all the meetings to support that, as I always have, and or to cover in place of the absence that anyone needs to attend. And they do not make exceptions and do virtual appointments since last year at all, or meetings. And we do have some KPPA, well, I call it KPP, it's KRS and KEHP and state police that already are part of that board in an advisory committee and do participate. Jerry Powell from SERS being the last board member last year that participated on a regular basis, and he was very active. I have to tell you that was greatly appreciated by the committee and the retirees. Thank you.
Okay. Did I note in the memo, Dr. Carver, that while it has been tradition that one of our trustees sits on that committee, we're not, we are free if we have to reach out to any retiree in the system. Okay.
That is correct. And like I said, I think one of the reasons why there was no one who actually volunteered at the time was I think that driving to Frankfurt once a month, no virtual meeting, I think that took everyone a little bit by surprise. And so we might get someone more interested for the next meeting.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I believe that we have a very solid lead on a C board member who may well take the seat.
Excellent. Good to hear that.
And I actually want to say we have two. They're both retirees as well. So I think the committee will help with you all looking at it. Thank you, Mr. Owens. I appreciate knowing that.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Pettyjohn or Dr. Carver? Dr. Carver, is there anything else in your committee report you need to highlight?
I don't think so, Connie. This was my first meeting, and so
yes, ma'am.
It was a lot for me to take in. And so, Connie, is there anything that you feel like that's in the report that we should point out? That
no, Dr. Carver, you did a great job. Only if the board members had any questions of Humana. They are on the call to take your questions if you have any questions about the data they presented, which is in the committee meetings and board books. But thank you.
Okay. Anybody have questions for Humana? I did highlight. That we saw a 20+% increase in the essential plan. If y'all somebody wants to kind of address what that actually means and
yes,
that translates to, it'd probably be worth our education level at the very least.
Larry Lowe or Carrie Lovell should be on the call for that.
Yeah, I can take that, Connie. It's Larry.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Cheatham, the Essential Plan is one of the two Medicare Advantage plans that KPPA offers, administered by Humana. It's the smaller of the two plans. There's only, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 people on the Essential Plan. But what it's saying there in your report does show that there was a 20% increase in the pharmacy claims costs. So the actual paid amounts by Humana for the members enrolled in that plan did rise on the pharmacy side by 20%. Most of the membership is in the premium plan. And you'll see there that the claims costs were pretty equitable between pharmacy and medical as far as their rate of change. So those claims rose by a little over 5% for 2024 as compared to 2023.
Was that increase due to the Inflation Reduction Act, you think, or is that unrelated?
Most of that would be unrelated. You know, the majority of the change required by the Inflation Reduction Act, the biggest change came into effect in 2025. So the 2024 plan year really saw an increase in specialty drug spend that would have been largely unrelated to the Inflation Reduction Act. This time next year, when we look at these same reports, you will see more directly the impact of the IRA. We're already seeing, as you may remember, the maximum out of pocket, so the maximum financial cost that a retiree could incur was lowered from $8,000 to $2,000. And as a result of that, we are seeing many more retirees hit that cap much earlier in the year than they have in years past. So we've begun reporting on that to Connie, and we'll bring that to the committee and to the board throughout the year. But you will definitely see that as a 2025 impact when we look at this year-end reporting next year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Dr. Carver, nothing else. I appreciate the report, and we'll move on. I think CEO quarterly report, I believe, is next. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have one call out from this report, and it's the first item, XTP. We've looked at XTP as a provider of what I'll call a forensic audit on our investment related contracts for some time. I think we first heard a presentation from them in the January timeframe. In the February timeframe, they actually presented to the Finance Committee. It turns out that we've got a bit of a divergence between KPPA's view of our needing to actually do an RFP and our C view, based upon the work that our council has done, that we fit well within the CERS procurement policy to have the board basically vote to empower your CEO to sign a contract. We believe, and I'll let Eric speak to the memo that he and his team put together, and invite Michael to speak to their memo as well. But I think KRS 78796 clearly states that we have the opportunity for management of investment assets that is clearly by statute outside of 45A. But there are certain things that you needed to do in order for it to be outside of 45A. And one of those was to develop your own procurement policy. And there are various number of steps that you needed to go through in order to do that. Well, we did that. And that procurement policy was passed by this board, I believe, in 2022. And so I'll turn it over to Eric to let him speak to the that he and his team did in looking at our procurement policy to see just specifically whether or not the board can vote yay or nay to empower the CEO to sign a contract under our procurement policy, this particular contract. So with that, Eric, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah. Eric, if you don't mind, let me just chime in real quick, just so everybody's clear on what we're going to talk about here.
Yeah.
And we'll go back. I think David may still be on the call, and he can address what XTP is. But I want to be sure everybody understands. We have not decided to do a contract with XTP. That's still something that's with the Finance Committee and maybe even the Investment Committee to make a recommendation on. What we are wanting to try to speed the process up from the standpoint that we've talked about this going back into the first of the year, is, if we do decide to do this, what route do we need to go? So we're bringing this particular decision or this particular recommendation or thought to the board just so that we get that part of the process behind us, and then can address the issue of whether we're interested in pursuing it or not. So with that, Eric, I just wanted to make that clarification for everybody.
Of course. So it's covered a lot of it, but we've done some research. We start with that statute, 78796, which does kind of delegate to the board the ability to make an investment procurement policy. That's what you have to do to get outside of the model procurement code, which is what state RFPs have done through. Really, the part of the investment procurement policy that we looked at was Section 5, which is procurement of investment, analytical, professional, research, and technical services. That's what XTP would be, and basically it's broken down into tranches, I guess I'd call it, of the cost of the service you're considering. So anything over $50,000, the procurement policy says it will be determined by an RFP, RFI, or RFQ. However, at the end is Section E. Exceptions to the methods of procurement above may include, but are not limited to, goods and services available only from one or two uniquely qualified sources. And the requirement there is that you have to document the reason you're not doing an RFP or following one of the other parts of the procurement policy. In our research, it seems like XTP, and this is a decision I guess really the board will make, I can't find anything similar to it, really. And the things that seem to make it completely unique are the contingent fee model and its specialization in, it seems like they sort of specialize in alternative investments and pension assets. So we simply believe that it's one of these services that is uniquely qualified under the exception. Which makes sense because it keeps things like that from going through an arduous RFP process for no reason, where it would probably be difficult to draft an RFP for this type of service. And really there's not much more analysis than that. It's the procurement policy which controls due to the statute.
For those that aren't on either the finance or investment committee, I know both Steve and Tommy, weren't around the first part of the year to hear the presentations on XTP. David, do you mind, if you're out there, do you mind giving us just a quick, 3 or 4 bullet point exactly what we're talking about here?
Sure. As someone described it, it's a forensic review of total portfolio costs. And it goes way beyond typical trade cost analysis that many may be familiar with. It digs deeply into partnership agreements within private markets and even other places. And often we'll find where agreements are not being followed, and that's resulting in higher costs to you, the asset owner. So it's a super deep dive, takes 3 to 6 months to go through the process. And then the goal is to identify savings that are available for you.
Okay. And my understanding of the presentation that we got back first of the year, the way, just for pure, everybody knows who everybody is. XTP is, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, a subsidiary of Wilshire now, correct?
That is correct, 100%.
Okay, all right. The way XTP goes in and does their forensic audit, they don't make anything unless, of course, there's savings found and realized, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to be, we're not.
Yes.
That's where Eric was referring to the contingency fee arrangement. So I just wanted everybody to understand what we were talking about here.
Are those potential savings? Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. Hackbert. I'm sorry. And then Bill, I see your hand up.
Right. Are those potential savings due to process changes or changes in contractual relationships? And if so, is that contingent? Any savings, would that be contingent upon successful resolution of those renegotiations of those relationships?
Yes, it is. It is contingent upon that, and there is no cost sharing that even begins until you actually recognize the savings in hard dollars.
I guess my question is, how do the savings, generally speaking, how do they accrue? What types of savings have they found successfully in other pension systems?
Sure. So many examples. Some of the basic ones within, say, a limited partnership agreement might be the waterfall calculations and performance fees, which are often very complex and surprisingly tend to not always be followed by the general partners who wrote the agreements in the first place. So that is one example. Other things are custodial issues, FX trading, where trading opportunities are not being fully taken advantage of. So sometimes it is a process change like that, and other times it's just a contractual agreement that's not being followed.
Okay. Bill?
Well, I'm trying to organize my thoughts. What I hear is that we want to have a discussion on setting precedent on how to determine if a vendor is unique in what they offer, and therefore we would not do a bid. Is that what's before us today?
I don't know. To some extent, I think there's a couple of things that go along with that. The first would be, we certainly went to the trouble in the process of establishing our own procurement policy, and part of that is to create these exceptions, whether it be for management, for fees, contracts, things of that nature, as well as these unique situations that come up. So yes, certainly and partly is exactly what you're saying, and the other part of it is just a question of us managing our own house.
And
well,
I can add a little bit to that. The statute actually requires when you make this procurement policy, it goes to finance and is approved by the secretary, and it has to follow best practices. So there's already a bit of a layer of approval to all of this through finance and administration, who would somewhat be responsible for an RFP anyway, at least under the model procurement code.
I guess I'm curious, is this a decision we make, or would finance administration make that determination as whether or not we need an RFP or not?
I think you all make it. You have to document your reasons. Okay. And so it doesn't say anywhere where that documentation goes, but I think it's just, it's obviously a good practice to do it. Yeah.
That's right. In case there's a question about it. Right.
So if I understand what you're saying, Eric, correctly, is it's our decision to make whether we think this falls into that exception rule in our procurement code. We decide whether we want to take advantage of it or not take advantage of it, and we in turn basically send that to finance for permission to follow it. Is that what you're saying?
That's Yes, I'm not entirely sure about the last part because that's not directly in the statute, but that would probably be a decent idea to do.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, on that, I don't think it's something that necessarily needs to be approved by finance because as Eric correctly stated, our procurement policy itself was approved by finance. But I think it would be a good best practice for us anytime we were utilizing our procurement policy that we put together our reasoning and our rationale and submit it to finance, not for approval, but just for transparency and communication.
Or for disapproval, for lack of a better option. I would agree with that. You know, we want to be fully transparent no matter what we are into. You know, I can't, I guess, you know, one of the questions I would sit here and say is, well, Bill, you go ahead and then I'll see if I can't gather my thoughts a little bit better.
Well, I'm glad you used the word transparency because that's where I was going.
Yep.
As a C board, I remember us saying collectively that we were in favor of transparency. So anytime we go outside a procurement policy, I believe there's two questions to answer. Can we and should we go outside the procurement? And so there's been an analysis that we can. I'm getting back to the process since that's what we're trying to establish. The process in order for the board to make an informed decision that a vendor is in a unique space that has no competition. And I didn't see anything in the documentation that was presented to the board. I didn't see the analysis made by Bronco. So I don't feel that I, as a board member, have enough information with a general discussion at the board level in order to make that determination. So I would think that we, as a board, would want to ask for analysis from the investment staff and from the administrative staff of the uniqueness of the vendor. I would also think that it would go through the CERS Finance Committee for discussion and vetting before coming to a vote or a validation to the full board. So those are my thoughts off the top of my head. I'd be glad for others to join in.
If I could speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Bill, I certainly appreciate the position that you're taking here, but I just want to not correct, but to parse your initial statement. Whenever we go outside a procurement policy, we're not going outside the procurement policy. We're actually following KRS 78796. We're actually following the prescription that the statute gave to us. And the statute said that if you want to be outside of 45A, you have to promulgate your own procurement policy. We did that. We painstakingly did that in 2022. So we're not going outside the policy. We're actually following the statute. Now, to the point about it coming before the Finance Committee, what I think we're trying to do here is to bifurcate this, to say, does the board believe that KRS 78796 is controlling here? And if so, that when that vendor, whomever that vendor may be, is found that is a unique vendor that has very little competition, can then the board utilize its procurement policy to actually enter that contract? Now, so this isn't the end, this potential vote isn't the end of the conversation. It is then, let's assume, or let's say that the vote is yes, that the board decides that, that we can utilize our procurement policy. Then it would go back to finance, and finance would have any and every question answered that it wanted to have answered about a particular vendor. But once those questions were ostensibly answered, then we wouldn't have to go through another waiting period to determine whether or not we could enter the contract, because that would have already been determined.
I guess a follow-up.
You're asking for board approval today, and I'm encouraging us to consider that it should go through a process. Now, your term procurement procedure and mine, I'm using it in a different format. I'm talking about the standard 45A state procurement policy is there for transparency and competition and not to look like anything else. And so we need to be very, very careful to ever go outside and make an exception. Not saying we can't do it. I'm just saying we should be very careful and very measured in the analysis before we do it. So I would encourage all the analysis to be done before there's any vote.
Following
I'm just saying process-wise, that's what I suggest.
Following Bill's comment, I guess two questions. One, what is the reason to utilize the non-bid procedures and non-RFP procedures? Is the assumption that it's simply a time saver, or is it the uniqueness of an RFP for this particular type of service that would be difficult to create? Is that the reason?
I think it's both, because we started this process back in January, and we started conversations with people around the table about an RFP even in February. But here we sit almost mid-June, and there's been no movement toward that. Now, again, I would simply say, Bill, to the point that you made, we're not going outside the policy. If we never wanted anything other than 45A, the board really, we didn't need to create our own procurement policy. We shouldn't have done that, because under the statute, we gave the impression that we wanted to make some decisions ourselves. Because, again, every investment contract, Bill, is outside of 45A. The investment contracts are not inside so it's not that the investment contracts are going outside the system. They're just not required to be in the system.
Well, I've made my opinions known. That's all I can do. I will say that transparency is perception as well as reality, and we should always keep that in mind.
A couple things I just want to. Yes, we've got the larger principled question with regard to our procurement policy versus state procurement policy. Legislature certainly gave us the ability to create our own, which we took advantage of, and we did. We have, over time, allowed things to not go through really probably, I guess, either one of them, if you want to look at it that way. I think even earlier in this conversation, there was discussion with regard to the assets from Bay Hills going through a liquidator. I'm not aware of any RFP or anything that was done to decide what liquidator we were going to use. So, I'm fully and 100% behind you, Bill, with regard to transparency. And I think as long as we create a mechanism to where, again, we identify and we decide, yes, this fits into either our exceptions or into one of our rules within our procurement policy that may fall outside of the states, as long as we turn around and do it up and up in board meetings and in committee meetings, and turn around and provide that information to the finance cabinet, even if it's just for informational purposes, I think we've achieved those goals of transparency. But I don't want to lose sight of what this particular project is all about. Because and I know I a lot of times we'll go back and talk about things back in the old days when I was mayor. But there were even things at that point in time that we did not have to deal with from the state procurement policy. And I'll use energy efficiency contracts as a perfect example. There are only a few vendors out there, and you certainly are free to go out and sign them or go out and put together those projects, but those projects were all contingency based. They were not fee based. Okay. So, I understand, and I think we absolutely got to do everything to make sure that we fill our requirements as far as both what public perception and what the law says when it comes to transparency. But at the same time, as a board, I think it's our objective, or should be our objective from a fiduciary standpoint, to move the ball down the field with regard to if we see there's an opportunity for cost savings. Because in this particular case, based on just what we know at this point after 2 meetings with XTP, if they don't find any savings, we're not out anything. If they do find savings, we get half the savings, they get half the savings. And I've seen different memos flying around, and and I think there's one out there that even puts a anticipated cost of $800,000-900,000. Well, that just means that there's that just means there's between 1.8 and $2 million worth of cost savings that could be had. If I can get half that and capture it, put it on our books, I certainly don't have a problem paying somebody the other half. Those are things that the committees, finance and again probably investment, need to review and look deeper into. But if we're going to potentially go down this path, I'd like to do it in two directions: the procurement side and getting our questions answered, and then the actual is this project worth entering into or not? And that's certainly where the committee process begins. But I just think if we went to the trouble, and everybody here but Steve and Tommy were part of that process as far as creating our own procurement policy, we either need to take advantage of it and use it when needed, or we need to go in and amend it and do away with the parts that we don't agree with. Mike, you got your hand up, sir?
I have a question. What is the relationship between XTP and Wilshire?
David, if you're there, you can answer that. My understanding is at some point in time. Go ahead, David.
Yes, we acquired XTP less than a year ago. We own 100% of XTP, and we spent about 2 years doing due diligence on them ourselves to determine if we felt that business was a good fit for what we bring to institutional clients. And our conclusion is obviously yes, we acquired the firm, so it's 100% owned.
I could not hear the response. Is it a subsidiary? Are they sister companies or same umbrella? What?
So Wilshire owns 100% of XTP. They are based out of Germany. They have not rolled under the quote unquote Wilshire umbrella as far as a name and branding, but Wilshire does own 100% of them. And as David was saying, we did that about a year ago. We spent a couple of years looking into the firm and evaluating their service, and we found that it would be additive to our client base as an additional service that we can bring to bear.
Good.
Steve, I see your hand.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to make a clarification on so the legal term for that Bay Hills is the liquidating person, and it was, you're correct, there was not an RFP. It was under Section 7 of the procurement policy, which is emergency procurement based upon the board's approval of the settlement for Bay Hills and the timing of settlement. And the CEOs were involved in that discussion as well. So I just want to make sure that that did follow the procurement policy, although there was not an RFP because of the timing element.
Steve, let me ask, because I think I saw that in some of the material. That was basically also under the CRS procurement, or was that under the state procurement?
That was under the CRS procurement policy. Okay. Both the K and the C have the same emergency procurement language.
Okay, just want to make sure exactly what we're talking about.
Sure.
Rebecca?
Listening to this conversation, it feels like there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. It feels like we're saying that if we go to RFP, that's going back to 45A. That's not true. RFP is defined within the CERS procurement policy, and it is its own. So a RFP under 45A is pretty complicated and time consuming. An RFP for Steve's group that falls under, I've already forgotten the number, I'm sorry, Eric, 78, whatever you quoted in your memo, is different. And you guys set those rules. It is not set by finance, doesn't have to be approved by finance. It is completely under your control. It's just an RFP or an RFI, request for information, or an RFB, request for a bid. There's a lot of options. It's not 45A.
I appreciate the clarification. So the question really is, all right, we're going to be using, one way or another, we're going to be using the CRS procurement code. The question then becomes, do we, use the bifurcated RFP, RFQ, RFI, whatever process, or do we take advantage of the exception rule that we have? Is that fair, Eric? So.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I don't know if that helps everybody or not. We're certainly not in any way, shape, or form trying to do anything that is not transparent. We just want to do it as efficiently as possible, and with the idea that if we are owed savings out there, that we pocket that as soon as possible, not later.
Seems to me that if we go without an RFP, we're basically assuming that we have a sole source, that it's the only company that could respect or to comply with our requirements and our desires and so forth. I really see very few downsides of not using an RFP. And in fact, there might be another company out there that we don't know about. So, and I think it's reasonable, and I think Bill makes a convincing argument. I would like to see this being addressed in the Finance Committee, to have a full discussion of it, and then coming to this committee for approval if that's what's required. It's been a while since we had the presentation, and I think it would be good to have this reviewed and discussed at the Finance Committee before we take a position on it.
And if I might, Mr. Chair, to the point that Rebecca made, and that's great clarification that we are using the CERS procurement policy, even if we do an RFI, and to the point that you're making, Dr. Hackbart, concerning there being possibly more than one company that's able to do it. The exception in our policy was written so that you could only use it if there were only one or possibly two people who could offer that service. So what we're basically asking for in this bifurcated look is let's determine that if that's true, and we'll run that back through the Finance Committee to determine that. And we can have a bunch of meetings about who would qualify for what we're looking for. But if we determine that there are only one or two, then the board has already authorized for us to be able to use our procurement policy to secure the contractors.
I think it's a good clarification, Ed. I think, what we're trying to do is just break this down into two decisions. A, how do we go about it? And B will be, do we want to go about it? And while they may be on separate tracks, to convolute the two conversations, we felt like it would be a lot better on our end to kind of determine what path we wanted to take on the front end, assuming what we think we know is what we know. Bill?
Well, I don't want to belabor my position, but two clarifications. A contingency contract is we pay them on future savings or future opportunity. So those are real dollars that come out of our checkbook, not from additional revenues. So it's a cost to us, but one that we feel is valid because of future savings that would be incurred. So I just wanted, that's how I understand the contingency to be set up. Number two, I still see this as a request for a pre-approval. And the wording it seems to change, but that's still the way I see it. Thanks for listening.
Okay. I don't, as far as the payment, I don't think we're even in a position at this point to address that. David may have better, or Chris may have better information with regard to how they got paid. But my understanding, based on the two previous presentations anyway, was that they don't get paid until we realize savings, meaning.
That's correct.
Correct.
So, if assuming that is correct, then yeah, I mean, somebody's got to write a check. There's no doubt about that. But if that means we write them a check for, half of what we save, not having to write it to somebody else, I'll switch checks with anybody.
I think the problem we have here is that the potential for being a good option for us is clearly there, but we seem to be dancing on the head of a needle to avoid procurement. And our excuse is, or our justification, if you will, is that it's a uniquely qualified service. I only know that because I got a memo to use those words. I don't know that one way or the other. And an RFP would open up the market, open us up to the marketplace to prove whether that's a valid statement or not. If someone else is also qualified and wants to provide a proposal, we can sure consider it. But the way you find out whether you're uniquely qualified or not is to issue an RFP. And that can be turned around in a fairly short process. So I'm uncomfortable with avoiding, I think we're avoiding our procurement policy with a very detailed excuse called uniquely qualified. So I don't feel comfortable with it. I believe in transparency, and this does not smack of transparency to me.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, based on what I'm hearing at this point anyway, we need to charge finance for sure. And if Dr. Hackbert, if you think investments needs to weigh in, then we need to charge them with reviewing the project as we anticipate it to operate, and come up with an RFP to be put out, assuming that that's a project they want to pursue. Is that the consensus of what I'm hearing?
May I
Yes, Rebecca?
suggestion, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
If it's the consensus of the board that you want to issue an RFP, and Rebecca has made it clear that this isn't the RFP process of 45A, that it can be done relatively quickly. I would hope that at the very least, this board would say an RFP or an RFI by a determined date, so that there could be no further delay in our moving forward on this project.
Okay. Rebecca, I see your hand.
I was only going to say that finance would not do this RFP. This would be a Steve's Group RFP. Finance will only do the 45A RFPs.
Okay. All right. So, Ed, am I taking your suggestion that you would like to see this board say to Steve, authorize Steve to come up with the RFP and put it out, and then based on the results, turn those over to the committees to review?
Yes, by a certain date, to have it in the marketplace by a certain date. Because one could say we started having the RFP process as early as March. So we were having a conversation about how you structure an RFP since March, and it's June. So let's put some tight timelines around when that RFP needs to hit the marketplace, so that we ensure that we get movement on something that I believe is critical to this board.
Okay. So what are you thinking as far as a reasonable time constraint? 30 days, 60 days, 7 days?
14 days.
Okay. Well, let's give them a little bit more time than that and say 30. Mike, I've seen you nodding your head. What are your thoughts?
30 days, I think. What's going to happen? The RFP will certainly show that we acted in good faith, number one, that if it truly is a unique source, the RFP will verify that. We might not get anything but this, I understand that. But I feel like that me and our board collectively would have done our due diligence by turning around RFP and see what the market produces of any other alternatives. May not, but then again, it would truly verify whether that's a unique and sole source of this service.
Okay. Bill, does that fit with your thoughts then, sir?
Well, it's summer and year-end close, so I don't know about 30 days, but I don't mind having an expectation and ask the administration whether they feel they can meet it.
Okay. All right. Dr. Hackberg, you got any additional thoughts, or are you fine with that?
I'm good with the RFP process, which I obviously in my previous comments would indicate.
Yep.
I would just suggest, again, as I suggested before, that maybe we turn this over to the Finance Committee to work with staff to work with a reasonable response. I think Ed makes a good point that we don't want to be too slow in this process. We can move it along as quickly as we can. On the other hand, I'm not exactly sure if there is a representative RFP that our staff could use to develop this RFP, because it is somewhat unique and different. I would like to give them, sufficient time, and if the Finance Committee could be involved and that they would approve that and then bring it back to this committee for final approval, I think we could move forward. The original presentation, I think, was way back in January, wasn't it, Ed?
Right.
In effect, I'm not sure there is really a critical time period here. I think that we want to do it reasonably and rationally and to the best possible way.
If I could, Dr. Heifart, I do think that it's time sensitive, and I don't believe that having the Finance Committee approve the RFI or the RFP is what we need to do here. If it's the consensus of the board that we want to go through the RFI, RFP process, allow that process to work. Steve is the one who will put that RFI together. I don't see what we gain by having board approval of that document, because in the end, the people who want to bid on it will, and we'll see from the response that we get, to Mike's point, whether or not it is a unique service. And if we get one bid or if we get 3 bids, then I think we can have the Finance Committee look at it and make whatever determination they want to make in terms of making a recommendation to the entire board, but not to slow down the process for us to have a Finance Committee meeting for them to approve the RFI. We've been 6 months trying to get this process moving, and we put ourselves in another 3 or 4 month delay if we did that. And I just say to you that I think this is a time sensitive, critical matter for our board. And RFP, if that's the consensus, that's the way it goes. But we need to have that hit the street as soon as is practical for it to hit the street.
Yeah, I think there's several items that we didn't touch on with regard to where the benefits are. Not the least of which is risk management and litigation potential issues going forward. So I do think it is time sensitive. Dr. Carver, I hate to go through and call on everybody individually, but I want everybody to have an opportunity to give their thoughts. What are your thoughts or feelings?
I tend to agree with, I don't know why we would have to take it through the Finance Committee. I do like the idea of putting the RFP out. I'm not sure what the difference is between an RFP and an RFI that Ed keeps mentioning. I do understand what an RFP is, however. I would like to put it out to see exactly what happens with it, if we do get who bids on it and who doesn't.
Okay. If it's in consolation, I've never figured that difference out either. So, Steve, if you know, I know what are your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think having the committee evaluate responses or anything is necessary. I think seeking competition within a reasonable time frame, is always prudent unless there's emergent circumstances.
Okay. Tom, there you are, sir.
Well, coming in the middle of this or the tail end of it, at a big disadvantage. I've got some questions, but I'm gonna hold on to them, and I will have a talk with Ed at a later date. Like I said, I feel like personally I would abstain from a vote on this just because I'm not informed enough to know.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. JT, sir?
Well, I think we need to expedite this as quick as we can because I do believe it's time sensitive. I don't care one way or other about the RFI, but I do think that we should skip the finance part, go
okay,
get the process moving.
All right. Well, let me put this out as a suggested motion that this board, and Steve, I'm sorry, Bill suggested I inquire as to your time constraints. Is a 30-day window enough time for you to, certainly if Ed helps you to get things put together?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is the construction of the RFP, RFI, and scope of service that we're interested in pursuing. And probably, now there's two parts, right? There's the dissemination of the RFP, RFI, so when we publish, and then there's usually an expectation of the window for responses. So I don't want to set unrealistic expectations that we'll have responses back in 30 days. But okay.
I think we're talking about just getting it out there.
Okay.
That 30-day window.
I think that's a reasonable target. And certainly work with Ed in defining the scope of what we want in that RFI or RFP.
Tommy, you got your hand up, sir?
Yeah, now I've got a question, of course. So
Yes,
let's say that we get this RFP done in the next couple of weeks and get it submitted out where you're looking towards the end of July for response. What if, like Steve said, there is no response in 30 days? Where are we going to go then? Would be my next question.
Well, I think we'll get at least one response, obviously, but whether we get 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know. I think at that point, once the responses come in, that's when it goes to the finance committee for evaluation, and we decide how we want to move forward from there.
Gotcha.
So, is there anybody? I tried to call on everybody as far as the trustees, but based on what I'm hearing, I think where the consensus seems to be is that we request that Steve and his staff, along with Ed, work to get an RFP or RFI or RFQ or whatever put together and out on the street within a 30-day window of time. I'll leave it up to you guys to determine what is a reasonable amount of time for response. And then once those responses come in, they get submitted to Bill and the Finance Committee for their review, and then we just decide how to move forward from there. Is that something everybody can? So I'll accept a motion to that effect if Sherry got all that down.
So moved.
Got a
Second motion.
JT and a second by Mike. Any other discussion, comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes have it. Motion is accepted as presented. I think we all appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing how this all shakes out, because I think we are here to find every opportunity, obviously, to make money on the investment side, but also save money on the expense side, and we've seen that over the course of the last few years. I know Bill worked hard with coming up with working with Kay and everybody to come up with the splits on how expenses are done. And one thing I know Mike failed to touch on, and I would suggest you all go back and look in the reports. I know this is off topic a little bit, but I didn't want it to slip away. But if you go back and look at the what I refer to as the accounts receivable, all those folks that have been carrying balances with CERS between May of last year and March of this year, that outstanding balance has been reduced by 39%, by approximately $1.4 million. That's $1.4 million that we did not have and probably would not have had otherwise. So this kind of falls in that same vein. So I think we got to concentrate on both sides of the business anytime we have the opportunity to do so. So with that, anything else added, or Ed, that you want to touch on in your report?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ryan, I know you've been sitting there patiently. Yes. First one, number one, I read through your report, and I want to tell you how impressed I was with it and everything you're doing. So I'll let you give us the lowdown.
Well, thank you very much. Very much appreciate it. I'm trying to be cognizant of the clock, so I might go a little faster than I would otherwise because I know we have a closed session, and to my left we have kind of the 2-hour suggestion. So I want to be cognizant. Please stop me on any item or offline. Always available to chat about any of these as well. So I wanted to start off with kind of the Senate Bill 10, the CRS retirement insurance. So I wanted the board to know that we are moved forward internally. Obviously, law is one thing, but actual implementation is another. We are transitioning to the IT side, and developing training materials is kind of coming just immediately after. Moving to staffing, we're at 264 right now. I've mentioned this in reports a couple of times. We have just completed some of the paperwork for round 2 of the IT positions. It affected 22 individual employees. That is a personnel cabinet initiative. We do get say on certain things, other things we do not, such as job classes and some of the impact to salary. I've said it before and just wanted to remind the board it is a material impact. We are reviewing that currently. Combination of myself and Mike Lamb will give additional detail on that, but really it's a derivative of what personnel did. On a positive note, on staffing, Ian is going to start in investments. We talked previously about kind of where he fits in the hierarchy. That support of the portfolio managers, we think will be valuable with positions to grow into, hopefully in the future, as it gets immersed in culture and additional years of experience. I have personal experience as well as Brian Caldwell in investments of working with Ian. I've said before, very talented, and he's available for all your Python programming. Any need you have, you can go to Ian on that. Strategic plan. I think the highlight of that is there'll be a full presentation June 26th to the KPPA board. We have 4 active teams, some success stories that we want to talk about and give kudos internally already. But it's not just really strategic planning. It's implementation of those things that have derived from the planning that a lot of us throughout the agency have worked on and are excited about. I want to move. Thank you, Chair. You had mentioned the trustee retreat. I took internal polls of the CEOs, of various staff, communications. Sherry came up with a lot of great ideas. This is where we've landed now. The term retreat comes with some negative connotations of Michael at a spa or Mike Lamb playing golf. We wanted to kind of avoid that and just really focusing on what it's going to be, educational. So we were thinking about the branding of Trustee Impact Forum, and you can see kind of what's behind that in the document. We would encourage, I know Sherry sent out calendar holds, but obviously some people would need to hold their personal calendar in the evening between those 2 dates. But we're looking for suggestions. We have a template of what's been done in the past. I've collected through some internal or trustee conversations, but we would highly encourage, the content that you want, we can program behind that. We can work with Ed and John kind of on putting that agenda together. We do have one final thing on the location on the procurement side for that, but the dates are locked in. We'll make it work, ideally at our preferred location, but we will make it work. So please hold those dates, and any suggestions you have, we are always open, particularly with something like this. The PPOB, Aaron and I gave a presentation in April. Just wanted to mention, I think it went really well. They've actually canceled the June PPOB date, so we'll look forward to July in presenting what the legislators asked for. Leadership Academy, I wanted to highlight. I think that is a very positive thing. Strategic planning. It's a result of strategic planning that this Leadership Academy. So this is one of the wins. HR has done a wonderful job with it. We've got a list of previous topics. I think the August topic will be very interesting because I'm going to present it. But then we're kind of at the sunset with November, kind of will be the wrap up, and then the 2-day lead conference. We're going to send those individuals that are in the academy. And I failed to mention the mentorship. There's another part of the academy. It's not just instruction. You have an individual in management throughout the agency that you can go to, not necessarily in your direct line or report. So you may be able to get questions answered, from other professionals throughout the agency. I think it builds relationships, and certainly the training HR has put together and various speakers, I think, has been great. Mike Lamb and I were able to complete the last 2 modules of the NC PERS. We really thought the program was needed for the risk management, which was previous. We did a lunch and learn on that, and then we just finalized the 2 and then represented KPPA at their annual conference and exhibit. Went really well, and we've enjoyed that, and some of that knowledge will seep into the board impact forum. Again, we can change, I guess back to that, we're happy to change the name if there's feedback, but that was kind of the internal poll from the CEOs and staff where we went. Then finally, the kudos section, which I always think is important. Public Service Recognition Week, I think, was a huge success. There was a lot of activities here. I enjoyed many myself. You saw the spotlights of various employees, so we hope you got a taste and a feel and a little bit of knowledge about various people throughout the agency. I thought those were well put together. I also wanted to move into the school board reporting. I think it's important to notice when there's a first time for success, and that was a first time for the success to get through the year-end service averaging for all 171 school boards. And that's never been done as timely. And obviously when that happens, it ripples through the agency and it moves on and allows others more time and better efficiency on timing related to that. So kudos to that as well. The compliance officer, I know there's really kind of a focus, her main focus, I think she's done a good job. She's got through a lot of that. Her main focus is one of the audit findings on the agency security trading policy. And Mr. Chair, I've mentioned that to you. Clearly, that wasn't a policy that was followed because I think it was overly restrictive and potentially would impair certain trustees' ability to make money in the financial industry. So that's one of the ones that Carrie is working on first. So we'll probably need some input from those that do finance. We have a number on both boards. So there may be some conversations and information so we can not impair day jobs and not impair other things that you do for your personal investing or what you would do for a career. And then just wanted to wrap up with member outreach. There's been a number of meetings, and I'm not the best at supplying a review of a training session or anything. So I always pay great attention when we do get positive feedback. And there was some reach out, non-solicited positive feedback. I'll read one. Your team's professionalism, unparalleled commitment to customer service continue to elevate the quality of our training programs. So I caught my eye and I wanted to share it with the trustees. So, Mr. Chair, very much appreciate the time, and as I understand, I'm happy to take questions, but just cognizant of the clock.
Ryan, we appreciate your work and your staff's work. I'm sure we could probably sit here and pepper you with all kinds of questions. You've had a year-long honeymoon, I guess, coming up here in just a few weeks. So I think it's gone well. I appreciate your hard work.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. At this time, I think we need to entertain a motion, go into closed session in order to address legal issues. I never can remember, do we need to read that statement before the motion or after the motion? After the motion. So somebody'd like to make a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
A motion by JT, second by Dr. Carver. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Eric, do you have the closed session statement available to you?
you can do it, Michael. I don't have it right now.
A motion having been made in open session to move into closed session for a specific purpose, and such motion having carried by majority vote in open public session, the board shall now enter closed session to consider litigation. Pursuant to KRS 61.8101C, because of the necessity of protecting the confidentiality of the system's litigation strategy and preserving any available attorney-client